The tragic journey of the Titanic continues to captivate minds more than a century after the disastrous event. On its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City, the ship hit an iceberg near the Newfoundland coast just before midnight on April 14, 1912, that resulted in the loss of over 1,500 lives. The Titanic stands as a lasting emblem of tragedy, a tale recounted innumerable times. Yet, amidst the turmoil and grief, numerous unsung heroes demonstrated astonishing acts of valor and self-sacrifice. Let us explore the lesser-known accounts of these extraordinary individuals, honoring their bravery and compassion. The band's final ode to serenity and their lasting melodies. As the formidable Titanic succumbed to the unforgiving sea, a group of 8 valiant musicians, led by Wallace Hartley, confronted fear and despair head-on. Through their poignant tunes, they aimed to provide solace to the terrified passengers. They continued to perform until their last moments, their touching elegy forever inscribed in history. Together with the bandmaster and violinist Wallace, are violinist John Hume and Georges Crins, the pianist Theodore Brayley and bassist John Preston Clark. Cellists Percy Taylor, Roger Burko, and John Woodward. Numerous survivors recalled that the musicians played until the bitter end, with one famously stating, "Many brave deeds were accomplished that night, but none surpassed the courage displayed by the men who performed ceaselessly as the ship gradually sank deeper into the sea." Their melodies served as both their eternal requiem and their rightful place on the records of everlasting fame. It is estimated that 40,000 people attended Wallace Hartley's funeral. On April 29, 1912, the Metropolitan Opera hosted a special concert to aid the Titanic victims. Aptly, the concert included "Nearer My God to Thee" in Autumn, both thought to have been performed by the orchestra as the ship sank. None of the musicians survived, and their story of playing to the end became a widely known legend. A contemporary newspaper declared the role played by the orchestra aboard the Titanic during her final, tragic moments will be remembered among the most honorable acts in the chronicles of maritime heroism. In March 2013, following a comprehensive 2-year investigation by the Forensic Science Service, it was revealed that a violin discovered in a British man's attic was the instrument played by Hartley in the ship's final moments. On October 19, 2013, the violin was auctioned in Wiltshire, England, for $1.7 million, as reported by the BBC, NBC, and the Washington Post. The violin now resides in a Tennessee museum dedicated to the sinking's victims and is available for public viewing. Due to moisture damage, the instrument has 2 large cracks on either side of the upper bout and is no longer playable. The indomitable spirit of Margaret Brown and her continued advocacy. Margaret Brown, better known as the unsinkable Molly Brown and famously portrayed by Kathy Bates in James Cameron's film, is one of the most memorable figures from the Titanic disaster. One of the most well-known Titanic survivor, Brown embarked on the ship as a first-class passenger on April 10 in Cherbourg, France. Brown later earned the moniker the unsinkable Molly Brown from writers, as she actively participated in the ship's evacuation efforts. She personally wielded an oar in her lifeboat and insisted that the crew return to rescue more passengers. However, her pleas were unsuccessful as she was met with resistance from Quartermaster Robert Hitchens, the crew member responsible for Lifeboat 6. Hitchens expressed concerns that returning would either result in the lifeboat being dragged down by suction or overwhelmed by desperate individuals trying to climb aboard. Following her rescue by the RMS Carpathia, Brown formed a committee with other first-class survivors to supply necessities and informal counseling to second- and third-class survivors. In 1914, she ran for a U.S. Senate seat in Colorado, but later chose to serve overseas as the director of the American Committee for Devastated France during World War I. In 1932, Brown was honored with the French Legion of Honor for her work organizing female ambulance drivers, nurses, and food distributors. In her later years, Brown pursued acting and passed away in her sleep on October 26, 1932, at age 65 in New York City's Barbizon Hotel. Margaret Brown's fame as a Titanic survivor allowed her to promote various philanthropic and activism causes, including workers' and women's rights, education and literacy for children, historic preservation, and the remembrance of the courageous men who sacrificed themselves on the ship. In 1985, she was inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, and Disneyland Paris named a 19th-century riverboat attraction the Molly Brown Riverboat in her honor. The gallant crew, unbroken in the face of peril, and their inspirational story. A myriad of inspiring and heartrending stories of courage arose from the catastrophic sinking of the RMS Titanic, with many involving the ship's crew members. One such account highlights the postal workers on board. Given that the RMS Titanic was a Royal Mail steamer, it carried around 200 sacks of registered mail. A survivor recounted watching all 5 postal crew members working relentlessly as the ship sank, striving to save the registered mail and transport it to the upper deck. Unfortunately, none of these crew members survived. The body of one postal worker, Oscar Scott Woody, was eventually found with his pocket watch still intact. The discovery of another postal worker's watch, belonging to John Starr March, lent further credence to the story. March's watch appeared to have stopped at 1:27, suggesting that the postal workers had indeed dedicated their time to saving the mail. Their courage not only helped preserve the mail, but it has also been reported that the registered mailbags on board the ship were utilized to aid in the rescue of the infant survivors of the disaster. The fearless wireless operators, Harold Bride and Jack Phillips. Harold Bride and his colleague John Jack Phillips, both wireless officers on the Titanic, played pivotal roles in sending SOS messages to nearby ships, ultimately enabling the RMS Carpathia to rescue the survivors. Phillips sent out CQD signals while Bride informed the captain about the ships responding to Titanic's distress calls. However, the RMS Carpathia, the first ship to respond, would only arrive after the Titanic had sunk. As the ship met its tragic end, Bride found himself caught beneath an overturned, collapsible boat. Defying the odds, he held onto its underside throughout the night until the Carpathia finally rescued him. Bride's survival was bittersweet, as his colleague Phillips did not share the same fate. Captain Smith informed both men that they had completed their duty and were relieved, but Phillips chose to continue sending distress calls valiantly. He stayed in the wireless room, operating the equipment even as water poured in, while Bride gathered personal belongings. Upon his rescue, Bride recounted his friend's extraordinary bravery and the deep impact of Phillips' unwavering dedication. While on board the Carpathia, Bride recovered from his injuries and later assisted the ship's wireless operator, Harold Cottam, in sending numerous personal messages from the survivors. Bride's life came to an end at the age of 66 due to lung cancer on April 29, 1956, in Glasgow. In remembrance of Jack Phillips, memorials can be found in Nightingale Cemetery, Farncombe, and the Phillips Memorial Cloister, which is part of the Phillips Memorial Ground located north of the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul in Godalming. Over a century has passed since the Titanic's tragic demise, yet its haunting legacy continues to captivate us. As we remember those who perished in the icy depths, let us also honor the unsung heroes whose unwavering courage and selflessness illuminated the darkness. Their tales of heroism and sacrifice shall forever resonate in our hearts, an eternal testament to the indomitable human spirit. And as we look to their legacies, we are reminded that even in the face of tragedy, hope and resilience can rise from the ashes.